All right, hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. And we are continuing the Flow Builder Masterclass, and we have covered the basics of flows. And then we started off with screen flows and we did some use cases. And I shared a super challenge with you guys. And now we'll jump into record triggered flows, right? Pretty much one of the most important kind of flows that you would want to understand and learn and practice use cases for is record triggered flows, because this is your alternative to triggers, writing apex triggers, right? So as the name suggests, record triggered flows run in the background whenever a record is triggered, meaning whenever a database update happens. It can be a create command, creating a record, it could be editing or updating a record, it could also be deleting a record, or it might be a rollback, right? So we can write flows on all those events that we captured on the triggers, which means this gives you an alternative of not writing code but trying to automate things via flows. All right, that's record triggered flows. Now in Salesforce, if I were to go to flows, we created the screen flow use cases, and if you have not taken a look at them, I would suggest you start from the very beginning and look at the flow builder playlist, the way it is set up and shared, right? That would help you come to this place with a good understanding and a tight grip about certain things, and it will speed up your learning process. All right, we have done some 5 ScreenFlow use cases, and I hope and I believe with most of your comments, the use cases were very helpful and the explanation was pretty much clear. What we want to do now is when we click on the new flow, this time instead of using the screen flows, which are pretty much about whenever a user has to put any input from their end, right, is when we go for screen flows. But then whenever you do want to do something in the background or maybe something behind the scenes based on a record trigger, right, is where you use record triggered flows. All right, that's where we use record triggered flows. Now we did screen flows wherein the primary thing about the screen flow was we used the screen element, but you would never have a screen element on record triggered flows because you don't need any user input, right? You want to do things behind the scenes. So we'll click on the create button and that creates your record triggered flow. All right, the very first thing it prompts on the start button is the object. So it tells you which object you want to trigger this flow for, when do you want to trigger this, and you can put some entry conditions and some filter criteria. All right, so we'll start looking at the record triggered flows. Let's jump into the very first use case. The first use case is when a contact's mailing address is updated, automatically update the parent account's shipping address. All right, too many things in this one line. When a contact's mailing address is updated, now what does that get you to understand? Where do we write the flow on? Is it the contact object? Yes, it is the contact object. When should this flow be triggered? It should be triggered when a certain field is updated, which means whenever the record is updated. All right, and what specific field needs to be updated for this flow to trigger? The basically mailing address should be updated. Any field in the mailing address box should be updated. All right, and as part of, as and when that happens, we want to do something on the account record, which is the parent to contact. So we'll try to find the parent record of the contact that is currently in context, and we'll try to update the shipping information of that account record similar to what the mailing address has been put as. Okay, so let's see how this sets up in Flow. All right, you have done screen flows, I believe most of you have done. If you are someone who's looking at this video for the first time, that's okay. Take a look at it, and if you're not able to make sense out of it, I'll suggest you go back to the playlist and start from the very beginning. Okay, that will give you a better approach and better learning curve. All right, so when you click on the start button, that's where it prompts you to choose an object. Now what is our object? This is a keyword search based drop down, and I can choose the contact object. So I've just defined that my object would be contact. All right, now when should this trigger run? Should this run whenever a record is created? No, that's not our use case. We only want this to run whenever the mailing address is updated. So based on the question, based on the problem, let's just say the record is updated is when I want to trigger the flow. All right, now if you see, you can do these many triggers: create, update, create or update, and delete. You have these options available. Okay, so you can write an event on any one of these triggers. All right, now the next thing it tells you is, do you have an entry condition? Like, do you have any criteria which record should be picked up if the flow has to trigger, right? What is our criteria? What is the criteria? That whenever my record's mailing address is updated, I want to run this flow, correct? I want to do some action whenever the mailing address is updated. So I definitely have a criteria. So I'll simply say all my conditions are met. Okay, and if you notice, this is pretty much similar to how we had it on workflows, how we had it on process builders if you have done them, and now the same thing is on flows. Okay, we are just entering the filter criteria, the entry criteria, similar to how you have in approval process also, right? So what is my criteria? That the mailing address is updated. Now here you have the mailing address field, all right, and this is your operator. Now, do you see any operator that tells you whether a field has been updated or modified? Yes, you see the is changed keyword here, right? So if you have to just simply track whether a certain field has changed or not, has been modified or not, you use the is changed operator. Okay, and just notice how things change. If this is on equals condition, see, everything is editable here. You have these options, and this says that you can run the flow every time or only when certain things are met. But as soon as I change this to is changed, you see that this is disabled, and you only get to choose every time a record is updated and meets the condition requirements that have been mentioned above. So when I'll say mailing address is changed should be equal to true. Now remember, true is nothing but the global constant true, right? So what does this mean? This means that I want to configure a flow on the contact object whenever the contact is updated and the mailing address is updated specifically. Only then I want to trigger the flow. Now, will this flow trigger if the shipping address is changed? No, because that's not the entry condition. It will not suffice the entry condition. It will not trigger the flow. As simple as that. Okay. Can you write multiple conditions? Yes, you can add condition and you can write multiple conditions. You can put multiple conditions here. All right. So you can add multiple conditions. I'm not sure this is prompting me to leave page. Just give me a second. It's probably doing a refresh or a reload. All right. So what we have said here is that the condition that needs to be sufficed or that needs to be passed is basically that the mailing address should be changed, right? And only then I want to trigger my flow. All right. And down below, it asks you when do you want to run the flow. I think I'll have to do this again. Let's say create. Let's say contact. Let's say whenever a record is updated and all my conditions should be triggered, should be matched. The mailing address has been changed, and whenever that happens is when I want to trigger my flow. Okay, so here if you notice that this is currently disabled. Why? Because you have put the is changed operator. Now what is changed does is every time you modify this mailing address field, the flow will automatically trigger. Okay, so every time the mailing address is modified, this flow has to trigger. That is what you're trying to say here, right? So that's what automatically selected every time the record is updated and meets the condition requirements. Okay, and it tells you because you selected the is change operator in a condition, you cannot change it to run the flow for updated records. To select that option, you cannot you have to remove the is changed operator. Only then you can choose the only when condition. All right, for is change scenario, only when condition does not make sense. It will always be every time the mailing address is changed, you would want to do something here. All right, and then what do you want to do with this flow? Do you want to do something on the contact record itself? If so, you can use the fast field update method option. Okay, what this does is this basically updates the fields on the same object which has triggered the flow. So let's say whenever the mailing address is changed, you want to set a flag on the contact object saying mailing address updated should be set as true. So do you need to do a fast field update? Yes, I want to simply update a field, so I'll choose this option right here. Okay, but if I want to do something else, it might be an action, it might be sending out an email, it might be sending out a push notification, it might be sending out an approval process, it might be doing something behind the scenes for another related object. All of that comes under the second part, wherein I want to do actions and related records, related actions. So I choose the second one. What do we want to do here? We want to be able to update the parent account, which is a related record, right? So I'll choose the second option here. All right. So as soon as I choose the second option, I can simply click on the save button and my flow template is ready and it captures my object, my entry criteria, and what exactly do I want to do with this flow. All right, let's click on the save button. I'll say record triggered flows, use case one, update parent account address. All right, that's my first use case. Let's say save. So it says that The flow cannot be activated. What's the reason? Because we have configured a flow, but we have not told it to do anything. And it says that the flow cannot run because nothing is connected to the start element. So you have a start and an end, but you do not have anything defined. So it does not let you activate it. All right. So that's okay. We'll just close this bar. That's the start tab, and we'll come get this in the center. And now we want to start doing things here. So the plus icon is again something that lets you add elements, and you have all of these options available here. Okay, pretty much similar to how we saw on the screen flow, but some things are available as extra or may not be available here based on the type of flows. So you remember you saw screen flows, you had a fault path, right? You could show a fault message. That is something that will not be available in record triggered flows. Why? Because there's no fault message available. All right, there's a different way of handling errors in record triggered flows. We'll see that how. Okay, now what do we want to do as soon as this flow is triggered? We want to update the parent account, correct? So what is the relevant tag? The relevant tag is update records option or update related records. Now, is contact and account related? Yes, they are related. A contact and an account are related. Who's the parent? Who's the child? Yes, the contact is the child and the account is the parent. So can I choose update related records here? I can. Let's go ahead and say that I want to update mailing address on account. All right, I'm not sure what kind of address it is. It is shipping address. All right, so let's just say shipping address should be updated. That's the API name, and you see that the name shows up here. Now, which record related to the contact do you want to update? Right, and if you notice, as soon as you click there, it tells you give me the relationship. That's what it needs. So I'll say record dot account. So what did I do? I chose the relationship field. So if I go into record, which is nothing but the contact record. Why does it say dollar record? Dollar record is a global context variable available. And why is it called a contact record? Because the flow is running on the contact object. If it were running on the opportunity object, the dollar record would basically mean the opportunity object. Okay, so the dollar record is nothing but the current context variable or record in question. Okay, that has entered the flow because the criteria was met, the entry criteria. All right, so I'll say record contact dot account. Okay, I don't need to choose here, and I can simply say that the account is the related object that I want to update. So it automatically picks up the record account ID. All right, and it says that multiple account records can be related to the contact triggering record if there are no filter conditions. All related records are updated, which means there might be scenarios wherein you might have multiple parent records. Okay, in this case there will not be, but there might be a scenario wherein you might have multiple records showing up for this particular record. Okay, if that happens, when will that happen? When you are updating children from the parent context, right? What if this was the reverse? What if you were on the account object and you want to update all the contact addresses? That means whenever one account is updated, all the child contact addresses should be updated. In that case, this would be true. You would have multiple contact records, and what this is trying to tell here is whatever you set here will happen and will trigger and will update for all the records that you have in the database. Okay, now in our case, what do we want to do? We want to simply say that the shipping address should be equal to the mailing address. Now address is a compound field, right? So what we have to do is we have to ensure that we map all the fields individually. So I'll say the shipping street should be equal to what is the field that I want it to equate to? The mailing street on the contact object, right? Now I said a while before, what do you call the contact object that's currently in context? You call it the record variable. Okay, so record dot mailing street is what I'll type, and I'll find it. And this is how you have associated the mailing street to the shipping street on the account record. Okay, do you want to update more fields? Yes, we want to. I'll simply say shipping city should be equal to the current record variable dot mailing city. All right, add field shipping country should be equal to record. Now you might be noticing this thing here. It's showing record and record prior. Now what is the meaning of record prior? Record prior is nothing but the older version of the record. Okay, since we are since we are running this flow on the update context, right? If you know a bit of Apex triggers, if you do not, I'll suggest take a look at my 30 scenario playlist, or probably the 30 use cases playlist that explains triggers, pretty much all of it, about everything about triggers, right? So Record and record prior are nothing but the two versions of the record. The record is basically the newer version, what is currently being updated as, and record prior is what it held beforehand, the older values, right? So it's more like trigger.new and trigger.old. Correct? Trigger.new map and trigger.old map. So you can use the prior record to check whether a value has changed or not. Okay, or you can compare, or you can try to set something as the prior value. All of that things can be done if you want to use the prior information. So you use the prior record, not the new record. But since we want to tag the new information to the account object, is why we are using the record variable. So I'll say record dot mailing country. Okay, let's just do this for the three fields. I think you get the hang, right? And here I've not put any filter conditions. Why? Because I want to do it for the parent. I don't have any extra conditions. Okay, so I'm just leaving it and saying update all the related records. In this case, only one account will be updated because every contact will only have one contact will only have one parent account. All right, so I've just chosen the existing option and I'll simply say save. Okay, and now that I have a node here, it gives me the activate button and it says that go ahead, you can activate it. So I'll simply say activate. All right, so our very first record triggered flow is now activated. Let's take a test. All right, now if I click on the debug button here, see, I have an option to tag the contact record here to debug it. Remember how we created a record ID variable on the screen flows, and that is what associated the record to the screen flow, right? Similarly here, this will automatically be associated to the record because it's a record triggered flow, right? So you can choose what contact you want to run it for, and then you have some options available here. Whether you want to run it immediately, that's the only option available right now. And then if you do not want the start conditions to run, which means the start conditions here, right? If you want to skip the start conditions and just take a look at the flow in its entirety, and you want to see that all my nodes are working fine or not, you can simply say skip start conditions. All right, so I'll say save and debug. Let's just say save, and let's say debug, and I'll say I just want to run Brian Dent contact record. All right, and since this is an update scenario, what Flow does best is it also gives you a snapshot of the record, right? This is Brian Dent's contact record, and you can very well choose to modify any field so it will simulate the experience of updating a record, right? And when it updates the record is when it will trigger the flow and the flow will execute. So it's trying to give you that entire simulation here without having to test it live. How amazing is that? Right, now what do we want to test? We want to test the start condition should work, right? Which means that the mailing information or the mailing address should be modified in order to trigger the flow. Now let's do this. Let's modify the level, and let's modify the lead source, and let's click on the run button. Let's see what happens. You see, it says that the flow was not triggered. Why? Because it did not meet the start conditions. Okay, the mailing address is null, which is empty, has not been changed, so it did not run. And now this time let's go ahead and try to edit the mailing address, or let's just say I want to add Australia as the country. All right, and let's say DXB as the city, right? So if you see that it shows a green line and it says completed, and it says that the update records node was run and it successfully did it. Now since you are running this on the debug mode, it will be rolled back. So all the changes that happen will be rolled back and it will not impact your actual data. The data stays as is, no data will be updated. All right, so once you're comfortable here, you can simply click on the activate button. All right, what I want to do here is I believe that in order to be able to check whether a mailing address is changed, similar to how we did here by individual fields, we might have to do the same here. So what we'll do here is we'll not say that the mailing address is changed. Okay, we'll simply say we'll simply choose each field. So if mailing city is changed, or let's say the mailing country is changed, right? Or maybe let's say the mailing street is, what do I have? Yeah, the street is changed. Right, what I want to do is I want to update it on the parent account if any one of these changed, which means instead of the AND operator, I want the OR operator. Make sense? So anytime any of these three fields on the contact object are updated is when I want to trigger the flow, is how you would read the start condition. And when I'm good with this, I'll simply say save, I'll say activate, Let's debug it one more time, and let's say run immediately, and then let's choose brand and record, and this time let's just modify one of the fields. All right, so I'll simply say this is basically UAE, right? And I'll say run. So you notice that the flow has completed. It was able to meet the start conditions because it got the country information which was changed. See, this is the new value, this was the old value. So a change was captured, okay, which is why it triggered the update records, and it might have updated the parent account, and it rolled back because it was run in the debug mode, okay, and that completed the flow interview. It ran for 0.68 seconds. So you get the time also. How long does the flow take to execute? All right, if you want to close all of these nodes, you can simply say expand all and collapse all. That will close all the nodes. All right, we are good with the debug. Let's go ahead and test it out. So what I want to do is I want to go to a contact record, right? So let's simply go to a contact record, right? And here is brand dense record, and trailhead is the parent account name. So let's go ahead and say brand dent, and let's go to the details tab, and I want to simply modify the mailing address field. Let's go ahead and say modify, and here I want to say that the city is DXP and the state is Dubai. All right, let's simply say save. So as soon as the save button was clicked, behind the scenes, you did not even get to know a flow was triggered. And what did that do? It took a look at the account record, the parent account record. It went inside the parent account record and updated the shipping address here. Let's check where is the shipping address. You see the DXP field is populated here. All right, let's try a modification. Let's go to the related contact again, and let's go to brand end. Let's say details. I have the address. What did I populate? I populated the city. Since we did not put a check, or we did not map the state field. Remember, we just mapped the city, country, and street. So let's simply say that the street is says, right, and then the country is UAE, right? Now this should show me these three fields on the parent account. Let's say save, and let's take a look at the parent account now. And if I scroll down below, you see that it shows me the street, the city, and the country name. So it's automatically populating the shipping address behind the scenes without you even knowing. That's how a record triggered flow works, right? Why did it trigger? Let's now take a look at, let's go back one more time. This time let's go to brand end. I'll go to details, and let's update the mobile phone, right? So if I update the mobile phone, should anything happen on the parent account? No, nothing should happen, because I did not touch the mailing address fields. So it did not trigger the flow, and the trailer account is pretty much the same. No mobile phone has been populated here because we did not do anything like that, right? We simply populated the shipping address. All right, so that's how you configure a record triggered flow, right? Now let's take a look at the challenge. So the challenge says do not do this. Basically, do not execute this use case if the mailing country that has been populated is either New Zealand or NZ, right? So you don't want to do this or execute this particular feature or a flow automation if the country is chosen as any of these two. So you want to put another criteria on top of what we have put, right? And I believe you are trying this with me, right? So if you're trying this with me, I'd encourage you to pause the video right here, try this challenge and see if it works for you. In this case, basically, when you try to update the child contact and you set the country as New Zealand or NZ, the parent account should not be modified. Okay, irrespective of whether you change the street or the city, it should not be modified. Okay, so let's see how to do this. If you have done this, great, or else let's take a look at it. Now, what do I have here is I have this particular entry criteria, right? And it says that any one of these fields, if is changed, I want to trigger this particular flow, right? So what I can do is I can add a condition here, correct? So what I can do is I can simply say that the mailing country should not be equal to New Zealand, or it should not be equal to NZ. These are the two string literals that we don't want the mailing country to be equal to, right? Now, how does this look like? Basically, how would I read my conditions? I would say either one of these three are changed, or the country is not equal to New Zealand, or the country is not equal to NZ. is when I want to trigger the flow. But that's not the right criteria, right? The criteria is that the mailing country should not be equal to any one of these two values, and one of these three values should be changed, which is why, since we cannot have everything on the or condition, we need to do a custom condition. And as soon as you choose a custom condition, you get the logic that you can define here. So instead of having everything as or and, you can define your custom logic. Now hear me out. I want this to be read as like this. This is pretty much basic mathematics. The BODMAS rule, you can use the expressions and statements and parentheses to define the order of the logic, and that's how it will be executed. It just has to be compilation free, meaning it has to be a relevant logic criteria. Okay, so this is what I've written. Now, how would you read this? You would read this as either the mailing city, the mailing country, or the mailing street is changed, and either mailing country is not equal to New Zealand or it is not equal to NZ. Is that true? It's not true. It should be 4 and 5. So either one of the three fields have been changed and the mailing country is not equal to any one of the string literals that we have mentioned is when this particular flow should trigger. All right, let's take a use case example. Let's say I create a contact and then I want to update it and I modified the contact field. Let's say I modified the phone field. Will this trigger the flow? It will not. Why? Because one of these three has to be changed. This will evaluate to false, false, and anything is false. Okay, let's say I made a change to the mailing city. Okay, in that case, the mailing city is changed. What did I set it to? I set it to DXB. So this will evaluate to true because the mailing city has changed. So one of these three fields should be changed, which is true, and the mailing country should not be equal to New Zealand or NZ. I have just set the mailing city. So this also evaluates to true and this also evaluates to true, which means the flow will be triggered and it should trigger. Correct? Now let's take one more example. Let's say I've made the mailing country as New Zealand and the mailing street as, let's say, 704. Okay, so mailing country and mailing street have been changed, which means this will evaluate to true. But mailing country is not does not equal to New Zealand will evaluate as false, which means true and false will still stay as false and this will not trigger the flow, which is pretty much as per how we expect it to run. All right, so this filters are similar to how you put filters on formulas, how you put filters on your validation rules, how you put filter logic or conditionals on your list views, similar to that. All right, so once we set this up, this should not allow you to trigger the flow if the country is set as New Zealand. Let's give it a try. Let's say save, let's say activate, and this is activated, right? I want to go in here, I want to jump into the contact. Let's go to brand dent. The first thing I want to do is I want to go to the details tab, and let's say I just want to remove the street information. So it should remove the street information on the parent account also. So here is the mailing address. Let's take a look at the parent account address field. It has DXB working perfectly fine. Okay, let's go back to the contact. Let's jump into the contact. Let's go to the details tab. And now I want to do is I want to update it again, right? I want to update it into something like Alnada, and then at the same time I want to put the country as New Zealand NZ. This time there should not be any update that should go to the parent account. If I click on the save button, it got updated here on the contact, but if I take a look at the parent account, let's see what happened. So you see, it still stayed the same. It did not modify it. Why? Because the New Zealand criteria did not suffice, which means the first part, the first bit of the filter condition was satisfied, meaning the country or the street field changed, which is true, but the country is equal to New Zealand. So the second part of the logic did not meet the criteria, and that's why the flow did not even enter the condition. All right. So that's how you can play with filter logic, is what I wanted to help you understand with this custom challenge. All right. So I know it was a bit too much, but it's pretty straightforward if you just understand the basics. If I'll encourage you to do it yourself, try out different combinations, make sense out of it, take a look at the video again, and then probably conclude this use case. All right, so that was use case number one. I'll see you in the next use case. Bye.